The first thing that I will note is that we are all delighted by the fact that de-escalation has seen positive results lately in connection with our protests. Each day, we have seen the police department, I think, take more steps to try to de-escalate the situation with protesters. We have not seen the deployment of tear gas in several days. We have continued to see better interactions between the police department and our protesters. That is important for us because we recognize that people have a right to protest. They have a right to be heard. We also recognize that everyone should be safe, and so I'm very happy to see that. A few things, though, that we wanted to make sure we were discussing related to what the protesters are actually talking about. And that relates to accountability between our communities, particularly the black community in Kansas City and the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I called an emergency meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners to discuss that, as well as other pending and important issues for us. And I had the chance to visit with them shortly before this meeting. I'll be speaking in essence on behalf, although we will certainly have another Board of Police Commissioners meeting open to the public in mid-June. The first thing I'll note is that Police Chief Rick Smith continues to be our police chief and will continue in that position as we weather our current crisis with protests and also as we continue to address our issues relating to violent crime and the high number of homicides in Kansas City. I also will note a few other things that the Board of Police Commissioners is looking to create and change. First, I will note that use of force complaints, of which we have heard several during the period of protests, but also use of force complaints more broadly, if they reach a level of severity that merits, will be sent to an outside agency for review in all situations. And so we will look to establish a firm process of use of force complaints being referred to outside agencies. That will be either one of our 4 relevant county prosecutors' offices, as I noted the other day, or the Federal Bureau of Investigation or the local United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Missouri. We will continue to work out procedures as to which abuses or alleged abuses, excessive abuses of force may arise to that level, but that is the step that we are taking now. We recognize, note, and agree with the fact that currently right now Jackson County Prosecutor Gene Peters Baker is taking a step to review a situation relating to the arrest of a gentleman that has been seen broadly and also has been seen by myself and other members of the Board of Police Commissioners and the department itself. There has also been much conversation about officer-involved shootings and other officer-involved incidents and the provision of probable cause statements. Changing perhaps what has been determined or described as recent policy, probable cause statements will be sent in officer-involved shootings and other officer-involved incidents to relevant prosecutors' offices, including the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. All other situations where there is not a probable cause statement that is sent, but there is an officer-involved shooting, will be referred also to outside agencies. In this situation, either the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office, or the Missouri Highway Patrol. And so what we're announcing in connection with that is that all officer-involved shootings will be reviewed by an outside agency, every one. Even in the situations where it appears the officer's conduct is justified, we will make sure that there is an external third-party review that has a chance to make sure that there is sufficient accountability for all. We are also able to announce now, and this is pursuant to some of the discussions we've seen in connection with the protests, but also largely in American policing more broadly, the Board of Police Commissioners has directed the police chief to conduct a review of the use of tear gas and other projectiles in either quelling protests or in other activities. This is me speaking personally. It's my view that tear gas and other projectiles should be used only in situations where there is an imminent threat to the life of either the officer or others in an environment. We had some discussion on what future policies may look like, speaking as a group once again, and so it's our view that we wanted to allow the department to come up with policy approaches for the use of tear gas and the use of other projectiles in connection with how we interact with either protesters or with other individuals. Another area that we've heard some amount of concern and complaint, and certainly we saw this tragically in the Minneapolis situation, was in how do other officers police the conduct of their fellow officers. We are looking to establish further clear guidance that any officer who has concerns or complaints about the conduct of a fellow officer can report that to the Office of Community Complaints, which will then be reported directly to the Board of Police Commissioners. In those situations, we also are establishing whistleblower protections for officers who take part in such reports to make sure that we can share sufficient information and have further accountability for everyone in our community, and certainly for officers who recognize that there is potential misconduct. That is largely what the Board of Police Commissioners has discussed today. We will have further discussion and conversation on all of those steps and all of those important processes during our next meeting, an open public meeting on June the 16th. As a reminder, we'll note the following, what I discussed: use of force complaints going to an external agency, probable cause statements being sent to the prosecutor's offices, and all officer-involved shootings being investigated by a third-party source, including all officer-involved shootings. We're also looking to conduct a short-term review on tear gases and projectiles, meaning that hopefully by June the 16th we will have an answer as to potential policy change in connection with their use. Whistleblower provisions for officers who have concerns with misconduct by their fellow officers. And then, I actually didn't note this before, there has been a concern often about how much the public knows about what the police department is doing. I know often it is discussed that there is a different control structure of the police department as compared to other American cities, and certainly compared to other city departments. We cannot change that in one quick action, but what the Board of Police Commissioners is directing the Chief of Police to do is to create a weekly report and to have the department present every week to the public. The vehicle by which they will present to the public is to the City Council. And so you will now see, effective immediately, a weekly report from the Police Department to the City Council of Kansas City, Missouri. Our goal and effort in that is so that council members who are representatives of the people of Kansas City will have a chance to ask any questions relating to police conduct, to police procedures, practices, issues, funding concerns, and so that they can get answers in real time. We hope that that is at least one step towards addressing our public, our relationship with the public's ability to get answers more quickly, and frankly, the City Council's ability to do its important job in funding the police department and knowing that those funds will be well spent in making the people of Kansas City safer. Leaving aside then our discussion from the Board of Police Commissioners, and we'll have more conversation on that as time goes on, there are a few other additions that I'm proposing today. There has already been discussion in connection with body cameras, and we see and we thank the DeBruce Foundation, our police foundation, in finding sufficient funds to help institute a body camera program in Kansas City. I will have a resolution for council today that will also look to ensure that if we have body cameras, they are properly used. The resolution will require not only that we have body cameras figure out their cost, etc., but that also those body cameras are turned on in all civilian interactions, and ensuring that those body cameras are regularly serviced and they're functioning. We will also have a resolution that requires that those body cameras have images that will be retrievable and shall be provided upon request to the city prosecutor, any county prosecutor's office, the Missouri Attorney General, the United States Attorney's Office, or any relevant federal or state authority. We also will require, in connection with our rollout of the program, that the City Auditor of Kansas City shall conduct an audit of the body camera program within 3 months of the start date of the program and present that back to City Council. Again, that will be to ensure that we are adequately using them, not just saying that we have them. Finally, there's been much discussion in connection with issues of prosecution. My office has been in touch with the City Prosecutor's Office. We've continued to talk to the Kansas City Municipal Court. We understand that a number of charges have been filed in incidents relating to the protests themselves, and there'll be more discussion about that later this afternoon at City Council. But there were also a number of situations where there have been previous concerns, both from myself and City Council, connecting with arrests and prosecutions in situations where, frankly, we might have felt that it was unnecessary. As part of that, I'm signing a pardon order for Roderick Reed. Roderick Reed, you may remember, is the gentleman who had filmed an arrest that has now become subject to a legal action by the Jackson County prosecutor against a number of, two Kansas City, Missouri police officers. This does not relate to the underlying charge between the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office representing the state of Missouri and the officers themselves, but this does relate to the fact that the conduct of filming any incident of police, any arrest, any police activity, should not in itself be illegal. In fact, I don't believe that it is illegal. If the concern is impeding traffic, there is a different charge for that. But as this case has wound through municipal court, now it's been appealed to Jackson County Circuit Court, I felt that it's necessary for us to actually move on beyond it and ensure that people know they have a right to film police conduct, and they have a right to actually make sure that that's shared more broadly. So we're pardoning Mr. Reed in connection with that incident. We recognize that these are just steps, and we recognize that people have far more questions for us, and there's far more work for us to do. Both in my conversation as it related to the Board of Police Commissioners and in my conversation and the work that the City Council does. It's all recognizing that accountability is important for 21st century policing, and it will be important in Kansas City. It also recognizes that this moment is not just about an individual protest on the plaza or in Kansas City, but instead how we can modernize policing, how we can build trust between police and our communities, and frankly, I think how we can help solve a lot of the challenges we have in Kansas City, including violent crime, if we build that trust between the community and the police. It's my view that the 5 steps that the Board of Police Commissioners are approving, as well as the steps that both I am taking and the City Council are taking, will allow us to build that trust that the community so wants and that the community deserves. I'm happy to take any questions. And I'll go...
Mayor, when do you anticipate the body camera being here?
I don't have an outline of that time yet. I need to have more conversations today, actually, with the Police Foundation in connection with that issue. We would all expect that prior to the end of 2020, we would be able to at least deploy that program in part.
What would it look like in terms of bidding that out, or do we have a company that the city's already working with? How would that process work?
Say that again.
What's the process of bidding that out? Do we have a company the city's already working with?
There is a procurement process, both by the City of Kansas City, Missouri, and the Board of Police Commissioners. I would see no reason to depart from the regular procurement process in doing so. There are a number of different firms I know that provide body cameras, some of which actually have better protections on making sure that they're turned on and almost automatically in certain situations, so we don't run into what happened in Louisville, Kentucky, where those body cameras were not turned on, and ultimately there was a shooting of what appeared to be an innocent civilian.
Mayor, some people think that the police department should have pushed harder for body cameras in budget discussions, because it seemed to be always set off to the side. Like you said the other night, obviously the cities that are financial strain were kind of broke. Should they have pushed harder for it earlier?
You know, I will say that I think all of us should have pushed harder for it earlier. We're in a different time, and we are trying to be as aggressive and as proactive as we possibly can be. I know that the body camera discussion has been one that has been around for some number of years. I think that it can be a helpful tool, but I will note this: it can be a helpful tool. It alone won't change everything we see, and in fact, that's what our protests largely around America are about right now, that visual images alone perhaps don't change policing and haven't changed all of the situations of potential misconduct. So we recognize it as just a tool, but one that certainly is important. Shannon?
So right now, the $2.5 million has been at least secured for the beginning of this body camera thing. Going forward, it's going to cost a lot more money to continue the program. So is the city going to pitch in? Where do you expect the other money to come from? Is that going to be from donations as well? City, police?
So that's part of my legislation. We want to make sure that not only are we funding body cameras, but that it is actually consistently funded year after year. Some of that is not just in the cameras themselves, but also data storage. As you imagine, there's quite a bit. And we are working on a way in which we can fund that, recognizing its importance, but also recognizing that we need to find budget space for it, given some of the other budget challenges that are hitting Kansas City at this time.
Mayor, what is your reaction to county prosecutor's call today, where she said that she denounces the prosecution of nonviolent offenders who have been arrested down in the county? You know, the processes are very different, very different. I understand that. What's your reaction to her comment that she denounces that?
The prosecutor is certainly entitled to her opinion, and as it relates to prosecution. In many ways, I agree with the idea that We need to be, in the criminal justice system, judicious in the charges that we continue to pursue. As anyone knows, not only do we have the police acting in certain situations to arrest people and remove them from situations where they have not violated the law, but there is also a question for every prosecutor in America, and certainly not just the 3 prosecutors, but I guess the 7 prosecutors in this city that have jurisdiction over events in Kansas City, perhaps 8 if you include the Attorney General, whether these are the types of items and matters that need to be pursued and need to be continued. And I think that it is fairly clear that a nonviolent offender who has not been accused of any destruction to property or any threat to persons may instead actually not need to be charged. I think I have noted that we will discuss this later in City Council. I think there's an ordinance to that effect. I also am using the pardon power that the mayor's office has pursuant to the charter in one such situation where I did not think a prosecution was necessary. And so in that situation, I think that we will review it. I don't know if I'd use the same word that she did. Everybody in the criminal justice system is doing their job in the best way they can, but I think part of the job is making sure that we are judicious with the use of prosecution.
Would you consider pardoning all of the nonviolent offenders?
Yes, I would.
Can you tell me more? Can you tell me more about that?
I would just say I would consider it. I think there are a number of different ways that we could address it. We could address it either through council ordinance, we can address it through the pardon process, but I think it is important for us to see if it makes sense whether we continue a lot of these charges, many of which are nonviolent, if they're people just stepping off of a sidewalk. I understand compliance with orders being necessary, but since those folks were actually removed from the protest at the time, is there an ongoing need to have them hire lawyers, have council representation so that they, for whatever reason, need to deal with a ticket of some small amount? Yes, sir.
What kind of progress do you make with board of commissioners on 8 Camp Way? Other cities have implemented this to reduce violence and police brutality throughout different cities. Do you make progress with the commissioners on trying to implement any of those kind of policies?
So,
Any kind of progress on the 8 Camp Wait today or police commissioners meeting? They put it out earlier this morning.
oh, yes. I think right now we've made progress on it. I think that there is going to be an ongoing, there's ongoing work at the Board of Police Commissioners. There are different opinions as for all of us in connection with the steps we'll take. I take from that proposal the fundamental idea that there needs to be more accountability, the fundamental idea that we need to evaluate the tools that we're using. I think you can see in the board's discussion today, particularly as it related to the use of tear gas and projectiles, that there will be that discussion about the utility of them in the future and the necessity of them. I think you'll also see us talking more broadly about the use of use of force, whether it's excessive in certain situations and where it should be used or it should not be. I think from our enhancements to reporting processes, particularly for officers who have concerns with other officer conduct, then you are seeing an expansion of what we're doing in terms of accountability. And I will say this, I think you're seeing a very engaged and active Board of Police Commissioners that is recognizing that we all need to step up in terms of viewing what our role is with the public and making sure the public knows that we are holding everyone accountable.
So why was today's meeting closed?
What's
Why
that?
was today's meeting a closed meeting?
Well, we cited the Missouri Sunshine Law, so there was a discussion of personnel issues and legal issues in connection with it.
We'll take one more question.
Overall, how would you characterize the police relations with the protesters? Were you okay with it? Were you concerned? What's your assessment?
I think by and large, our Kansas City police officers have acquitted themselves well throughout this situation. I've said this before. Our officers who are standing the line on a 90-degree day, which it has been, it appears, almost for the last 3, are standing there, are doing their job in most situations, are hearing a great number of comments, some of which negative, but that's part of their job. And they are the ones that do not make the decisions as to the deployment of, let's say, tear gas. They're not the ones who are making decisions as to how many officers will be assigned. That is a command issue, and frankly, I think that's why we brought it up with the Board of Police Commissioners, because if there are concerns with how we are operating in connection with these protests, Those are concerns that are command decisions that are important with the chief of police. They are not concerns of what I think is an officer who's standing on the line. I have great respect for our officers who have gone out each day, done their jobs, and I think done their jobs well. I think to the extent we have concerns and challenges, and I have some concerns, and I've articulated them previously, I do not think that every arrest has been one that was necessary or essential. I think there are some where we probably could have used a different approach, and I think when you talk about materials deployment, it could have been done differently. Those are discussions that I will continue to have with the Chief of Police, and those are policy decisions that we will make at the Board of Police Commissioners to correct that and to change that as quickly as possible and where necessary.
Yeah, just quickly, the organizations that have donated money for the body cameras, have the city approached those organizations before? And I'm asking just because I think people kind of question about why this happened now.
Have the city approached the organizations that donated the body camera funding?
So has the city previously approached that organization on body camera funding? We have a pretty significant relationship with the foundation. The police foundation, I know, is supported regularly by the DeBruce Foundation, and so I think what I would say is that yes, there is an ongoing conversation about how foundations can help support some of the costs of policing in Kansas City. That said, I will say that it has been a very clear perspective of the City Council. I served on the City Council prior to being mayor of Kansas City, that we have supported body cameras. I will say this, it is a view of me as a City Council member that are voting to increase the police department budget somewhat significantly every year, outpacing most every other department in the city, has been in an effort to support things like body cameras. We were not able to get it done until this point, but I'm glad that we were now, and I look forward to the process from there. Thank you all so much.
Once you guys have your live shots, if you want to hang for 1 second.